Hello, brave fellow travelers. Lisa here, and I wanted to follow up on my top 5 favorites video. I filmed it yesterday, looking at the 5 decks, which really ended up being more like 10 decks that have just knocked my socks off in 2018. I wanted to follow up with a video that looks more comprehensively at like the real standout decks from the year. And even so, there's some decks that I'm not going to talk about, which I don't even have with me here. So, you know, I've honed it down. I've got 12 decks that I want to talk about, and not at great length. Because the other thing that I want to do is revisit my 2018 year ahead spread. Now, I love doing year ahead spreads. One of the reasons I love doing year ahead spreads is because they give me a framework for life to teach me more about the cards. So it's less about trying to figure out what's going to happen in any given year. I don't really, predictive mantic, what I call mantic tarot, that kind of predictive relationship to the tarot, not so much what floats my boat, but instead the sort of interpretive process, that really mindful tarot process of using life to help me read the cards, using the cards to help me read life so that I can hunker down more completely in the experience of this moment right here, right now. That is what floats my boat. So what I'd like to do is go through my year ahead spread from 2018 and use that as the framework to talk about these standout decks. I think it'll make sense as we go along. So my card for the year, the theme card, was the Empress. Yeah, let's just absorb, suck that in. So, you think about the Empress, you think about growth, you think about development, you think about nurturing, you think about all those qualities of a really sustaining, natural relationship to the unfoldingness of life. The part of the Empress, the kind of forcefulness of the Empress that really showed up for me this year, is also thinking about the ways in which that unfoldingness of life, that fructating, fertile, energetic growth element of the Empress is tied to a kind of severe inevitability. I mean, life just unfolds, It just unfolds. We live in time. And what does it mean to live in time? So there's a quality of the Empress that showed up this year in ways in which growth meant growing pains, and growth and fecundity also meant loss. Just thinking about the ways in which life being full, which is a phrase I've used, I think, in a bunch of video. I've said, oh, my life is full, my life is full. That fullness is not always anything even remotely comfortable. That's been a theme of this year. Now, the deck that I wanted to talk about, a standout deck for this year, is David Palladini's new Palladini Tarot, which is, I don't remember when it came out. I want to say, 96? Yeah, something like that. And the artwork, if you know David Palladini's artwork from the Aquarian Tarot, there's a kind of airiness to the Aquarian Tarot, that vintage deck that I love so well, that is replicated in, 20 years later, more than 20 years later, when he made this deck, the new Palladini. This deck has kind of elongated faces. It's a little bit, I think some people find it creepy. It's still got the rods, have that sort of vegetable quality to them, and it has that sort of static sense of all the cards that we see in the Aquarian Tarot, but it's not as airy, it's not as swordsy. What I love about this deck is, here's the Empress. I love many of his women, and I love the way in which Palladini has this gentleness. Even when he's looking at a card like the Five of Pentacles, there's a kind of softening of what can be the harsh edge of life. a kind of nobility and sweetness that sometimes has a kind of melancholic edge to it. So I love his women. Look at this strength card, for instance. The new Palladini tarot reminds me of the ways in which I can confront even the most powerful and powerfully unsettling sides of the Empress's life force with a kind of sweetness, a kind of softening, a softening in the heart. Okay, so that was my theme of the year. January, I got the Daughter of Wands. I'm not going to say that much about each month. I'm going to say stuff about the standout months, and I'll say about something about the decks that I bring forward. So one of the decks this is the Page of Wands, which corresponds in Kim Kranz's deck to the daughters. The pages are the daughters. I've been really, really obsessed now, pretty much for 2 years, but finally I got this year with the Soprafino style, those 19th century Italian tarot decks that one version is captured in Lo Scarabeo's classic tarot. That's the, I want to say 1835 Della Rocco Soprafino tarot. Soprafino refers to the delicacy of the engraving style. Now, this style is most familiar to modern tarot readers from Lo Scarabeo's Ancient Italian Tarot, which looks at a later copy, we don't know who it's by, but a later copy somewhere, I want to say in the 1880s, of the Della Rocco. I have the Ancient Italian Tarot. I like it. I love the imagery of it, but I hate the cardstock and I hate the backings that I have. So I got the Il Meneghello Soprafino Tarot, which I like, but I don't love. I don't know. I'm still on a quest. I'm on a quest for this style of deck, and there's something about what it does with the wands, that Soprafino style capturing the vitality of the wands that it's just special. It's powerful. So this is the Soprafino Tarot. That was January. February for me was the Ace of Swords. And in fact, this has been a really Ace of Swords-y year. There's been lots of, for me, the swords are really about, they're not just about mind, but they're about, in the sense of the intellect or rationality, they're about our ability to like see the whole, to be able to cut through the multiplicity of life and see eithers and ors, be able to balance. The swords relate to the balance of justice. They relate to our capacity to meditate and sit in the middle of life. But the Ace of Swords is the kind of most, I want to say the most onesie card of the swords, because it really is about the vitality of mind and bringing that energy into life. I guess one of the themes of the year for me is how the severity of my energetic nature, how that gets balanced out by a kind of sweetness or mercy. I'm thinking about the Tree of Life here in severity and mercy. Chesed and Gevura, the two sides of the columns. That's really been kind of the dualism for me this year. And just as the Palladini helps me kind of balance with kindness the force of the natural growth inherent in life, the Vintage Romantic Tarot reminds me of the angelic qualities of the ace. So I got the 3rd edition of the Vintage Romantic, the Baba Studios. I'm looking for it here. And oh my God, it's so beautiful. I mean, it's so beautiful. And I love using this with clients actually, because the images are themselves so evocative, People don't even really need to know that I'm working with tarot. They can just dive into the art. In fact, fine art decks, I think, are the right kind of fine art decks, I think, are really, really powerful for a kind of mindful approach to tarot with non-tarot people. Anyway, I love this deck. Many of you know this deck. I've never owned this deck. I just can't quite stomach most of Baba Studio's prices, but this was released. I got it pre-ordered, and I love it so much. I got a second copy that I'm holding in reserve. So, Vintage Romantic, 3rd edition. March for me was the 8 of Wands. So that moment of our projects are hurtling through space, our intention is out there and it's about to land, that sense of speed, of things coming to a conclusion, of a trajectory, of life moving. In March of this year, I was definitely moving forward with a very, very new approach to my life, having left the university and, tenure and academia, and seeing whether I could make it in the real world. So the deck that bespeaks for me the kind of clarity and simplicity of putting our projects out into the world with that kind of 8 of Wands sense of a speed that is because things are in motion, not necessarily because things are moving so quickly, and not necessarily because things are moving toward a good target, but they're in motion. That sense of the 8 of Wands, for me, got caught up in one of my 2018, I think one of the most amazing decks that came out this year, which was Brigit Esselmont's Everyday Tarot. I know a lot of you don't like this deck. I love everything about this deck. I love the color scheme. I love the simplicity of the imagery. I love the cardstock. I love the price, $9.95. I love the matte gold edging, beautifully done. Beautifully done. It's what we see in the Brady Tarot, folks. This is, what we can now do through China. This is all Chinese printing technology. They're the folks who invented paper, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that China is now sort of taken over the world with printing technology. This is high-end production at a, Urban Outfitters mass market appeal price. This deck is for sale in Urban Outfitters. It's $9.95. I love this deck, and it really captures. I love these doves with the wands. It really captures something powerful about the 8 of Wands. The 4 of Cups. So after the sense of projects being kindled and moving toward conclusion of the 8 of Wands, I get the 4 of Cups, like that inevitable down, what's the word I want to say? That inevitable letdown, there we go, of like, really? Is this it? I thought this was kind of an exciting moment. Not so much. That sense of the glass being not only half empty, but filled with a rat. No, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. This image in Kim Kranz's deck speaks to me on an emotional level, but on other levels, I don't quite get it. But it's a great parallel to a card that came up for me later in the year, which is the 4 of Swords. So the stasis of the 4 of Cups, like just that ennui, that is this all there is? So the deck that I wanted to bring forward as a standout deck is the Tildwick Tarot. Okay, this is Neil Lovell's deck based on architecture. There is, not only is there no human figure in this deck, there's no living figures other than a few cards that have sort of foliage or references to the garden, but the kind of the conceit of the Tildwick Tarot, it's unbelievable. The conceit of it is sort of moving through a a stately English mansion. Now the cardstock is glossy in a way that I don't like, but it's beautiful cardstock. The gilding is also that sort of glossy gilding, which I don't normally like, but it's not sticky at all. This is a beautifully produced deck, and I wanted it for 3 years, I think, and just I couldn't. The price tag, especially coming from England, it was over $100. It just seemed like, again, you know, I don't, unless I'm getting like the most special vintage deck in the universe, and even then, I think there's only a handful of decks that I've even come close to paying $100 for. One of them was a vintage romantic, which I think was vintage. I call it vintage Victorian romantic, which was $85, and then the Tildwick, which I got for just $100, just about $100. Okay, enough about money. It's a very hard deck to read on many levels. The images are quite monochromatic and sort of muddy, and I don't know if that was intentional exactly. They all have the feeling of sort of faded wallpaper and the sort of texturing of walls, but they all are rooms in a mansion. And some of them speak volumes immediately, and some of them required a lot more work. So this is the Four of Cups, and just that sense of loneliness, you know, like the antithesis of the Nine of Cups vision of kind of drinking one's full and being, you know, completely sated and happy. Here we just have 4 tankards on a shelf. The Tildwick Tarot, it so deserves a really long video. I've done a few readings with it, actually a reading for a client with it, which is very powerful, but it's not an easy deck at all. I should have mentioned it in my top tarot projects, because it is a deck that I intend to spend a lot of time with in 2019, but there you go. Okay, so January, February, March, April, May. May was the Son of Pentacles. You know, that stalwart, that most reliable, that most Samwise Gamgee of all of the knights, right? The deck that I've chosen, the standout deck that I've chosen to bring forward for this is the Sacred India Tarot, which I'm going to be working on a lot more in 2019, and I don't want to say a whole lot about right now. It's an out-of-print deck, 2011. Hard to come by. I stalked it on eBay for a good year before I finally found a copy that I could afford. The discs in this, so each of the suits goes through one sort of strand of sacred Indian literature or myth, most related to Hinduism. The story of the discs goes through the life of Buddha, which I think if you imagine Buddhism to be, I don't know, if you imagine meditation to be ethereal and sort of in your head, then you might think discs, the Buddha. But to me, it's a brilliant choice. And to think of the Knight of Discs, the Knight of Pentacles, as the Buddha meditating in deep samadhi, in deep concentration. This takes our kind of stalwart Samwise Gamgee image of the Knight of Pentacles as like the most reliable of all the knights. You know, he can sort of be a boring figure, like too methodical, too reliable. But here you're like, no, my God, he's completely grounded, completely rooted. I love it. Okay. A card that I've always adored, both in general, the Four of Swords, with its idea of withdrawal and retreat and convalescence and meditative inward hunkering down, but also in Kim Kranz's vision of it with this beautiful lamb under the suspended swords, you know, that suspension, but with its third eye aglow. I talked about this card yesterday in David D'Angeli's 2018 Starman Tarot. A beautiful card. I'm bringing forward this deck again today because after I finished filming, I was like, and had uploaded the video, I was like, oh shit. I completely confused the Starman card with the Fool card in this deck. The Starman, this is not the Starman, this is the Four of Swords, but the Starman corresponds to the Magician in this deck, and that kind of makes sense. Although I keep wanting to think of this as the Fool. I keep wanting to think that the Starman is the Fool card. David DeAngelis has the Starman as the Magician because he's talking about kind of the alignment and conduit of all forces, and that makes really good sense to me. But then his Fool card, which is the card I was saying I disliked, is the Sacred Clown, and I just think, no. Aesthetically, I don't like it, and no. I like what he says about the Sacred Clown, but no. Okay, Starman Tarot. My card, my standout deck to illustrate January, February, March, April, May, June. June's Four of Swords. July was Death. I didn't learn anything new about this card, but this was the one card in the 1 month all year that I was like, okay, I think I know what death means. July was my deadline, really, for resigning from the university, which I didn't quite do. I kind of pushed the deadline ahead. I'm not literally, my contract hasn't been completely severed. I'm on leave, but this was the month where it's like, yeah, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. This is a death. This is, life is going in a new direction. And I love how Kim Kranz reminds us of death and life together. We all sort of know this about the death card at this point. We know that it's about transformation and regeneration and growth and renewal. The Moonchild Tarot takes that to a really kind of trippy, collagey, happy level. I don't think this image needs any huge interpretation. You know, we've got snakes shedding skin, we've got butterflies, we've got all of we've got the women dancing under the sky. We've got everything we need to know, including the moon, that this is about phases and transformation. Moonchild Tarot, like Kelly Fitzgerald, I own the Star Child Akashic edition, and it's way too pink and pretty for me, but I loved the quality of the cards and the production. You are the dance of light and shadow. And when I started to see images of the Moonchild Tarot online, I was like, yeah, okay, this will be the one. This will be the one. I haven't really worked with it. It's still in order because all I've done is sort of flip through it and fondle it. But there's no question I will be working on this, and that it's a deck that I can also use very nicely to read for others. It's a beautiful deck. Yeah, and you know, my star sign is Cancer, so I needed it. Moonchild Tarot. Okay, August. August is when I started my new job, hospital chaplain, and it's nice that was the, after so long of feeling isolated in my old work, to have my new month of employment be the Three of Cups, and the idea of being in community and being in a kind of blessed community. That was really thrilling. There's something also about the way the sun, whether it's setting or rising in this picture, is quite literally warming, heartwarming, that made me think about my two standout decks from the year, both new to me this year, that really emphasize the play of light. So one is Chris Butler's Healing Light Tarot, which this is my favorite card in the deck, the Magician. The Magician here, which really reminds me of things like in the Starman Tarot, the sense of the Magician as the Starman. I got that wrong yesterday. I got confused because I wanted this to be the Fool, but it's not. But that sense of energy being channeled. This you know, the other connection to the Starman Tarot, this is basically the same cardstock, okay? Maybe even a little thicker in the Healing Light Tarot, but that kind of glossy Lo Scarabeo cardstock. But this, you know, silhouetted imagery, this play of light and color, and it reminds me, and I love, you know, what he does with the blues. This is with his blue colors and with the cups. I think this is, you know, I don't really care for his numbering, but, you know, there's a lot to love in this deck. It reminds me of Masa September's Silhouettes Tarot, which I have wanted for a really long time, on the basis of someone telling me that they thought it was a really powerful deck. I was like, how could this is a deck that has Mickey Mouse ears on many of the images, many of the silhouettes. How could this be a powerful deck? And they're like, no, really, this is a very powerful deck. So it's out of print, but there was this one window this past year where Masa September was selling seconds, and it never comes up on the secondary market. I've seen it like once on eBay, once in 3 years. There's this window, which I just landed in, like I just happened to go online and discover on Masa September's Facebook page that he was selling seconds of the first edition, like, you know, as-is copies of the first edition for like $50, which, you know, given that it's been out of print for a long time, like, yeah, sure. So I got a copy, and the cards are amazing. I mean, there's nothing really wrong with them. There's a couple that have maybe a slight goofiness, so like a little dent here or in there, but really almost imperceptible. Here's his Three of Cups. And I have found it to be a deck that does give me really surprisingly powerful readings. It's edged in silver. This is the first edition, so it has the borders. The second edition, I think, is preferable, but I feel lucky to have been able to get the first edition. And it's cutesy. It's super cutesy in ways that I don't like. And then it's really amazing. Look at this Justice card. You know, look at the Magician. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff and beautiful stuff. Just beautiful. And then there's, you know, like some of the things that happen with the Pentacles. I mean, look, is that the page? Yeah, the Page of Chalices. I mean, there's beautiful. Look, it's beautiful, look. I got to show one of the Mickey Mouse ears. You guys have probably, many of you know this deck and may have this deck and may have seen this deck. It's been, when did it come out? 2015? Something like that? I mean, the mouse images, I don't know. I don't quite get it. But even when I don't like the cards, and there are a few that I really don't like, the Ten of Pentacles is one. I'm looking for that one now. Or even when I kind of don't like the cards, you know, like this Two of Swords, you know, I mean, it's okay. I get really strong readings from this deck. You know, just goes to show you. It's not always about, it's not always about you. Okay, moving along. So August, Three of Cups, time for community. September, you know, really diving into the new job, getting my first paycheck. Ace of Pentacles, you know. And a reminder with Kim Kranz's deck of what it is to be at the growing center, right? I mean, there's so much to say about the circles here and the sort of the rings growing outward and the life force at the center and that star. I mean, this is a brilliant card with the way it really evokes, again, the pentacle in the image of that growing trunk, that growing center of the trunk. For me, it also evokes the spinning wheel of the Dharma and the sense of being at the center of the wheel, which is the only part of the wheel that doesn't move as the wheel spins. But that vibrancy, right? At the heart of the heart. Whoops. So Tattoo Tarot, Megamunden, and Diana Collis's deck, right? This Ace of Coins. I don't know. I just love it. I don't know why, but the peacock imagery, there's nothing really, I don't even have anything deep to say about this, but this is one of my favorite cards in that tattoo tarot deck, just for the, like, I could picture this on my back. You know, this is a real tattoo that I would gladly have on me, and perhaps someday will. Okay. October. So, you know, I begin the new job. I leave the old job, death. Begin the new job, Three of Cups, grace, community, rejoicing. Dive into it deeply, Ace of Coins, like finding that living center, the still point in the middle of the turning wheel, the Ace of Pentacles. And then October. Now we're in the world of work. And Kim Kranz's Three of Pentacles, you know, it took me a little while to really hunker down with this card and love it and appreciate the mountain. You know, her sense of the Three of Pentacles, you know, for me, the Three of Pentacles so much is about, it's about kind of the masterwork and the ways in which ego needs to find its anchoring within community for that masterwork. So even to be the artist, you know, it's the artist in the context of the medieval cathedrals, where the artist is kind of anonymous and part of this huge community that is creating the great spiritual sanctuaries of the medieval world. Kim Kranz, I think, this mountain is one way that she reminds us that the kind of teamwork of the great art, the great work, is what's required to really climb those mountains. That, you know, this is, there's a challenge here, and we need to embrace community. So for me, the movement from the Three of Cups to the Ace of Pentacles with its unitary meaning, into the Three of Pentacles with its sense of we're part of a community again, but now a community of work, that does express what it means for me to really enter into my new spiritual life's work path. And I come to the Spanish Tarot, which is not a deck I acquired this year. It's the one place I cheated, but I was talking so much about the Spanish Tarot yesterday that I had to pull out this card. This card with the way, I mean, it's just beautiful. The color scheme in this deck is gorgeous. The light, I've lost a little light here. The sun's gone behind a cloud, but so this isn't quite giving the card justice, the colors justice. But that, you know, traditional Marseille patterning, where you realize that the third pentacle that's dropping into this dyad, this couple, and creating community, that 1 + 1 + 1 equals 1, that sense of a community that comes together as one, at the same time that you're breaking through, in a dynamic way, you're breaking through the sort of balancing of the dyad. The Marseille styling reminds us of this heart at the heart of this movement, and this sense of a balance that's really dynamic. I love it. Okay. And penultimately, November, the High Priestess. Yeah, what does it mean to go deep, to trust our depths, to trust the depths of intuition, the depths of the moon, the depths of the watery soul? How is the world of the High Priestess different from this lightning, gathering, channeling, funneling energy of the magician who acts as a conduit, whereas the High Priestess allows the depths to be depths, the mystery to remain mysterious, the darkness to remain dark. I always associate the High Priestess with the notion of prajna and prajnaparamita in Buddhism, but the perfection of wisdom, and wisdom as wisdom is something that doesn't care too much about light. allows the dark to be dark. So, so as a standout deck, has nothing to do with darkness, everything to do with lightness. I brought forward the Tarot of the Master, which is the Lo Scarabeo version of the Vaqueta, the Naibi di Vaqueta, the Vaqueta Tarot, late 19th century. This is all about delicacy and filigree, and oh, I love this star card. And I love the coloring of the Los Scarabeo. This is one place where Los Scarabeos, what do we call it? Historical decks, where I really like it, and I don't mind the card stock here. I hate the backings. It's just the Bagatello, the magician, but it's just, I don't like backings that reproduce an image from the cards. But I love the delicacy, the tendrils, the sort of way in which everything becomes illustration and filigree. You know, everything's about these ribbons. It's that kind of ornamentation, this sort of the delicacy of Vaqueta's imagery. It's not about meaning, it's about all of the things along the side. You know, we've got the hanged man, but what our eyes are really drawn to are the curly ribbons. You know, you've got the hermit, but it's like all this stuff along the side. And here's the papist, right? The high priestess. You know, one of the things about Vaqueta's deck is it resists being deep. It's all about decoration. But there's a way in which resisting being deep is kind of the same thing as being deep. It's saying, you know, the depths are not there to be plumbed. The surface is not to be discarded. It's like that Japanese aesthetic where you might get a very, very simple gift, but the gift wrapping is like incredibly ornate. And an American or Western sensibility might be like, let's rip open the wrapping and get to what's important inside. And the sort of Eastern aesthetic is like, no, it's all equally deep and it's all equally surface. So the Vaqueta Tarot, which is all about surface, in some ways reminds me of the way in which the High Priestess is all about depth that we're not trying to plumb and to make meaning shoot out of. We're not striving to do anything. So that was where I ended at November, really, was, you know, can I live in my life with its complexity, its simplicity, its surface, its depth, without trying to make it make sense all the time? Can I live in the fullness of my life in a gentle-hearted way, without trying to turn everything into meaning, without having everything make sense? And I entered into December, and December for me always begins with a week-long silent retreat. And during that silent retreat, my dog Homer died suddenly. And that's when I really, you know, encountered the harshness of the Empress. You know, we love things, they die. There's death and there's life. And, you know, I've lost people in my world, and I've know many of us, even some of you watching right now, you might be having health challenges that are incredibly scary, or life challenges that are scary, or you might have just lost someone you love. And so, you know, I'm always a little hesitant to talk about the death of a dog, which might not make any sense to people as being at that level, but, you know, Homer was more human than canine. My card for December was the Daughter of Pentacles, you know, the Page of Pentacles. And here's the thing about Homer. I realized that this card is Homer. In fact, he's a big old pit bull, so in some ways he looked more like a herd animal than a canine. Like his face, I mean, we always joked about him being like a cow, like a Holstein cow. He was black and white, or like My Little Pony, because he was 95 pounds and came up really high, and more like a deer. I mean, the wide set eyes. So I now am thinking, even though the gender is confusing because this is a female gendered card and Homer was male, but we all know gender in tarot doesn't really mean anything. But this card now for me forever. The Page of Pentacles is Homer. So I'm going to be pondering what that means. I just got cut off at the end of that, so just to finish, I'm going to be pondering what it means to think of the Daughter of Pentacles as Homer for a long time. And maybe at the end of 2019, I can say more about this card. Okay. Love you all. Take care.